In this episode of Satansplain, I'll be answering some questions from you, the listeners, about a variety of topics, including satanic success, the construction of satanic rituals, joining the Church of Satan, a satanic look at the Star Wars Sith mythology, and the impact over the years that technology has had on learning Satanism itself.
Well, it's not Satan worship, it's Satanism. It's embracing the life-enriching things which have traditionally been given the devil's name. Pride, lust, earthly success, rational self-interest, atheism, humor, nonconformity, science, a passion for living, being selective about whom we love. We don't see these as shameful sins, but empowering ideals. And we also recognize the psychological power and fun of symbolism and aesthetics, so we utilize Satan as mythology's most fitting mascot for what we're about.
Satansplain. Satanic Talk with Church of Satan Magister Bill M.
Magister Bill M here with Satansplain. In this episode, I'm going to read some listener mail and share my responses. Let's get right to it. In the first email here, Lanny writes, I'm sure all the patrons of Satansplain know the definition of success, but I wonder how many understand it in a satanic context. I feel like many people in general measure success by how their accomplishments compare to those of others. For instance, as a semi-professional musician, meaning I am paid to play at local venues and at special events, I used to see myself as unsuccessful because I didn't have a recording contract like most other musicians I've been a fan of, or I couldn't quit my day job based on my income from music. Then it occurred to me that a lot of those people to whom I compared myself are in positions that don't allow them to have other things that I have. Artistic freedom, a permanent home, time with family and friends, company-paid health insurance, a retirement plan. So, in a very real sense, I can see myself as more successful than I might have been if I'd led a similar life to those people. It comes down to personal priorities, really, which leads me to my point. I see success as being satisfied with where I find myself at a given point. Sure, I have my goals that I have yet to meet as a musician, as an artist, as a person who wants to travel and experience many cultures. In the meantime, I'm happy with where I'm at and proud of my lot. There's nothing intrinsically wrong with evaluating myself by comparing my accomplishments and abilities to those of others. In fact, it's a useful tool for determining my potential and my limitations. But once those things are realized, at the end of the day, success is finding that I'm at the top of my personal game. Having said all of this, I wonder how much of this you as a Satanist agree with, or have you anything to add? Thanks again for your time and attention. Well, thank you for the email, Lanny. I wrote back to Lanny and said that I agree with his assessments overall. As I've said before on Satansplain, envy is arguably the least pleasurable of the 7 deadly sins. Anger maybe is around there too, but in both cases, there are ways to channel that sin for personal success, whether it's envy or anger. I guess one way to oversimplify this is to note that although herd conformity is one of the 9 satanic sins, we do embrace the 7 deadly sins, as per Satanic Statement number 8, and those sins include envy. So, satanically speaking, perhaps it's bad to try to measure success based on what the crowd is doing, which may not even be fulfilling to you. But as Lanny points out, looking at the success in others and doing some comparisons can be valid in some cases. Speaking as a musician myself, there are musicians I've idolized over the years because I saw them perform and thought, wow, that's amazing. I envy that ability. Hey, I want to be able to play like that too. And so I worked at it and I improved. Another satanic point brought up here in the email, though, is the third side. In Lanny's example here, it's assumed by many people that a record contract with a record company is the definitive mark of success as a musician. But in reality, you don't necessarily have to subscribe to this false dichotomy of contract equals success and no contract equals struggling musician. And, that analogy extends to all other professions, but to stick with the music example, speaking as a musician myself, I would have to say that the music industry is quite different than how it was a generation or two ago. And a lot of that has to do with the internet and other technology. Before the internet, if you wanted to get your music heard by people or get your music available for purchase or have a concert tour and have people know about that, etc., typically you needed the help of like a recording company as well as a good manager or promoter to get that done. Not to mention just to make a demo tape to give to somebody in the music business or to a radio station and the like. You typically had to pay for time in a professional recording studio or rent or buy recording equipment and try doing it yourself, like get a 4-track recorder or 8-at machine, whatnot, and hope you knew what you were doing. But now, of course, you can record an album at home on some multi-track software on your laptop, like Pro Tools or even GarageBand. You can upload a video to YouTube and so on. So, satanically speaking, one drawback to all of this is that technology has made it easier and easier for more and more shitty acts, let's be blunt here, to have their music out there. But that's another conversation. In fact, even before the internet and all that, this notion of getting a record deal and all that still wasn't the only way to be successful as a musician, I would argue. Let's look at the classical world. Not only are there famous musicians whose names are still known centuries later. I mean, Beethoven did not need to sign with Atlantic Records to be famous. But look at professional orchestra musicians. Many of them have degrees from conservatories. Many of them make a full-time living as professional musicians. The fact that they aren't recording and releasing solo albums is irrelevant to the success of their careers. I've known some professional musicians who played places like weddings and jazz lounges and so on. So like some that were in wedding bands. People who didn't have a record contract, maybe didn't even write their own songs themselves, but performed songs that were in demand and happily made a full-time living as professional musicians, playing weddings and the like. Maybe being music teachers on the side as well. There are plenty of ways of making a living in music besides being a rock star with a record contract. So getting back to the main point of all this, sometimes as a Satanist, you have to stop and see how you're measuring success in your own life as the god of your own life. Are you sure that the thing you're striving for is the only way to do it? So there's some things to think about. Mark writes from New Zealand. He bought a Dr. Shit's t-shirt from the Satansplain store, which safely arrived in New Zealand. So thank you for that, Mark. I imagine the shipping to New Zealand was not cheap. I go through a third-party company for the merchandise, but I get a couple of bucks when people buy something there. So thanks again for that. Mark also writes that he just recently joined the Church of Satan, and he writes to me, quote, I am very grateful for all your insight with the Satansplain podcasts. It has been my inspiration to finally join the Church of Satan after 10 or so years. I am delighted to be part of our infernal minds. The Devil's Mischief podcast has also been a wholesome source of humor in a world where comedy has been, in some cases, diluted, to say the least. I have many creative projects on the board. Your work will guide me forward to create and be the best I can be. For that, I thank you. Best wishes and hail Satan, Mark. Well, you are very welcome, Mark. I am happy to know that Satanists like yourself enjoy Satansplain, as well as my other podcast, The Devil's Mischief. I released an episode of The Devil's Mischief not too long ago. That's on RadioFreeSatan.com. I've got an email from Kopelnia, hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, who writes about imagination in satanic ritual. Kopelnia says that within the psychodramatic theater of satanic ritual, quote, sometimes I become a Sith as an imaginary being from the Star Wars series. I especially appreciate the character of Darth Plagueis, called the Wise One. When invoking quote-unquote hellish forces, I take him into account. It is very refreshing. I believe that much of the imaginary philosophy of the Sith is based on the religion of Satanism. Well, thank you for the email, and as I showed earlier this year when I did the episodes exploring the book, The Satanic Rituals, when it comes to crafting and performing a satanic ritual, Satanists are certainly not limited to Christian mythology. If you open the Satanic Bible and look at the infernal names, for example, you'll see dozens and dozens of different gods taken from mythologies the world over, which a Satanist can utilize. And of course, the book itself, the Satanic Rituals, the companion to the Satanic Bible, that has examples of all sorts of world mythologies, each put into a satanic context. There are even 2 rituals based on the fictional world of the author H.P. Lovecraft. So there's no reason, I think, why a Satanist can't utilize imagery from a fictional franchise like Star Wars. And back in, I think it was episode 50 of Satansplain, when I talked about the law of the trapezoid, I think I even pointed out how the Star Wars movies, I've noticed, make very good use of the trapezoid in the evil contexts. You see it a lot in the aesthetics of the Empire, or just indicating chaotic change and danger in general, like with the Sandcrawler. So if this is a source of very emotional, moving symbolism for you, and you want to utilize it in a ritualistic context, then I say go for it. You could very well design a ritual that follows the standard 13-step ritual of the Satanic Bible and just utilizes names and writings and decorations from Star Wars Sith fiction. As I've said before, the standard satanic ritual is organized enough so that it has the necessary amount of structure to it, but it's loose enough to demand your own personalization and customization. At the very least, I know some Satanists, myself included, who've utilized some of the Star Wars orchestral music in the ritual chamber. Personally, I think the Episode 3 soundtrack has some great, sinister-sounding pieces from John Williams that work well in the ritual chamber. But getting back to Sith lore specifically, I don't know if I would go so far as to guess it was modeled on Satanism. I do know George Lucas was big on world mythology and borrowed certain images and archetypes from here and there. So I suspect it was more of an unsurprising coincidence that archetypes he picked up on for an evil context may have had some overlap with what Anton LaVey would have done for Satanism. You see some of the archetypes like, red and black and, again, the trapezoids and so on. And I suggested to this listener that he or she check out a book called The Book of Sith. Now, this is a novelty book written in 2012 by Daniel Wallace. You can find it on Amazon these days. And it's basically constructed to look like a workbook / history book written by Darth Sidious, the Emperor character in the Star Wars movies. And it talks about Sith history, certain moral codes of the Sith, and so on. And aesthetically, I think it's a great little item, great little novelty item. Philosophically, I wouldn't say it's completely satanic. For example, I've read some bits, maybe it was in the book, it might have been elsewhere, but about Sith being loyal to a master and so on, but there's certainly some overlap philosophically with Satanism too. Another piece I've seen is called The Sith Code, and I found a copy of it online. Here's what it says. Peace is a lie, there is only passion. Through passion I gain strength, through strength I gain power, through power I gain victory. Through victory my chains are broken. The Force shall free me. Now, obviously, the Force is a specific concept within the Star Wars fictional franchise, but in any case, I think there's certainly something to be said about the rest there, satanically. Let's move on to another email. I have an email here from Devil Since 1997. That is his or her chosen email name. Devil Since 1997 writes, some say ritual is DIY, do-it-yourself. Basically, do whatever you want for whatever reason you want. Do you feel that way, or do you feel that it should be more specific to the rituals that LaVey crafted and published? So my full answer to this question is something I've talked about before in a couple of different episodes of Satansplain, especially the 2 episodes set on satanic ritual back in episodes number 48 and 49, especially the first half of episode 49. In short, though, I have certainly run into some Satanists who claim, satanic ritual is do whatever you want for whatever reason. And these people are simply incorrect. It's true that there is no single right way to do a satanic ritual, but that doesn't mean there aren't thousands of wrong ways. If you read the Satanic Bible and read about the purposes of satanic ritual and so on, it's not hard to think of some examples of things that wouldn't fit the bill. If you're trying to do a satanic ritual while simultaneously playing a game on your smartphone, or leaving your phone on the altar because you're expecting a call, I'm sorry, but you're simply not doing it right. Now, if you want to use your smartphone to play background music, say, to enhance your satanic ritual, well, that's a completely different story. Even then, I would say you want to shut all other notifications and, phone calls off if you do that. All the more reason why your ritual music source should be something other than your smartphone. But if you're jumping back and forth between reading Enochian keys and playing levels of Candy Crush Saga, then once again, you are doing it wrong. This is a solemn space you're setting up to direct your will and manifest your desires. That's what the ritual chamber really is. Not to fuck around on mundane things. You can do plenty of that outside of the ritual chamber. And the gaming thing is just one example. Again, if you have the Satanic Bible and you've read it, again, it's not hard to think of other hypothetical examples of simply wrong ways to go about satanic ritual. And to people who think that stating this fact and calling for consistency makes me some sort of oppressive gatekeeper, or that I'm somehow imposing on your personal liberties, well, I'm here to tell you you're not being independent or more satanic than me by tossing out structure. You're just being a pedantic, scatterbrained jackoff. Mind you, that's not what I'm calling this listener who wrote in. I'm not calling this person that. This person just asked a simple question, so I'm going to assume it was asked with good intention. But anyway, hopefully you get my point. And again, even if you were to follow the standard 13-step ritual of the Satanic Bible completely by the book, as strictly as possible, you still won't have two Satanists who perform it in the same exact way. The ritual demands some personalization, and there's more than enough room for it. Which infernal names do you want to call? Which Enochian key do you want to read? What do you want to use for your elixir? What about your chalice? What about the other altar tools? What are you using for the sword? Is it a dagger? Is it a military sword? A samurai sword? A cane? A broom handle? A toy lightsaber? What music are you playing in the background, if any? What else is on your altar? Again, like no two Satanists are going to have altars that look the same. What about the whole personalized step, number 10? That's the whole climax of the ritual, the purely personal part. That's basically a free-for-all. So, you have a formal beginning and a formal closing and whatever you want in the middle, essentially. And so on and so on. Well, I'll be answering some more questions on ritual and a few other topics in the second half of this episode of Satansplain. So let's take a break right now. Stay tuned. You are listening to Satansplain.
You are listening to Satansplain, real satanic talk with Church of Satan Magister Bill M. For questions, comments, and correspondence, send an email to bill@satansplain.com.
Handmade, all-natural, botanical perfumes, soaps, and ceremonial incense, sculptures and jewelry to adorn yourself and your other altars. All this and more await you at moonandsunemporium.com. Ritual perfumes and other occult fine art luxuries, created and curated by me, Priestess Sarah Josephine Clark, with tarot readings by Reverend Dr. Dylan Clark. moonandsunemporium.com.
The Satanic Scriptures hands down the wit, wisdom, and diabolical perspective of the Church of Satan's High Priest, Magus Peter H. Gilmore. These essays, articles, and diatribes have been collected from over 20 years of the High Priest's writings for his infernal cabal, some first issued in the pages of publications available only to insiders. From the magic of toys to techniques of time travel, Magus Gilmore leads the reader down a left-hand path where few will find what they expect. Magus Gilmore reveals principles of satanic ritual in a frank discussion of forbidden rites. What is a satanic funeral? How do Satanists marry? Find out now, as these unholy ceremonies have never been disclosed outside of the Church of Satan's hellish hierarchy. Here is the philosophy for those bold enough to be their own gods or devils.
Visit thesatanicscriptures.com for more information. Released by Scapegoat Publishing. Available in paperback form from major booksellers and independents nationwide.
Magister Bill M. here with Satansplain. Visit the main website for the show at Satansplain.com. There you can find every Satansplain episode. You can also listen to Satansplain on Spotify, YouTube, Audible, and a host of other places. If you are on social media, please give Satansplain a like and a follow, whatever the equivalent is, on Facebook, X, and YouTube. Likewise, if you're listening now on YouTube, don't forget to hit that like button for this episode. For all questions and correspondence, email me directly. The email address is bill@satansplain.com. If you enjoy Satansplain and would like to support the show, please go to the show's page on Locals. Point your web browsers to satansplain.locals.com. You can sign up for Locals for free, but you can also additionally become a paid subscriber there. That is the best way you can support the show. Though we also have a merch store, as I mentioned earlier. You can go to store.satansplain.com for that. And thank you, as always, to all of you who support the show in one way or another. I have a satanic anecdote sent in from none other than Church of Satan, Reverend Gregory. So let's read that now. It's been way too long since we read a satanic anecdote on Satansplain, hasn't it? Satanic anecdotes, or as we call them here on the show for short, Satanecdotes. Yes, it is time to cue the Satanecdote theme song.
Satanic Anecdotes. Satanecdotes.
Hello, Magister Bill. I'd like to share with you what happened when I got my taxes done. I walked into H&R Block for my first ever appointment dressed in slacks, a fully buttoned shirt, a vest, a blazer, and a bright red sigil of Baphomet around my neck. After a greeting or two was exchanged, my tax assistant told me that I looked like a, quote, Russian pastor, which I took as a compliment. Thanked him for it and sat down. He would later do some searching with me there and discover it was Rasputin's name he had forgotten, and I wonder if his diabolical legacy is what set the stage for what happened. There was a lull due to slightly outdated technology, and he turned to me with a nervous smile that I took as good faith curiosity. I couldn't help but notice, he started, keeping his voice low, what you're wearing is a symbol of, and here his voice fell to just above a whisper, Lucifer. I gave him what I believed to be a comforting smile, laughed a little, and said, Satan, actually. I pulled out my red card, showed him its declaration that I am a priest in the Church of Satan, and beheld in his face a mixture of awe, fascination, and curiosity, not to mention some other reactions I didn't bother to place. He explained that it's the opposite of what he believes, and shortly thereafter confessed that he's a Catholic. Technology decided to cooperate a bit longer, but when it broke down again, he asked me about a typical day in the Church of Satan. I made a baby-eating joke that I regretted almost immediately when I couldn't tell if it landed. But at length, I explained that there is no physical building and that Satanism itself is about living the best, most fulfilling life the Satanist can conjure. That every day I'm looking for ways that I can pursue my ideal self, my ideal life, my thorough satisfaction. I was also able to disabuse him of the notion that Satanists were devil worshippers. As we finished, he mentioned it was one of his core beliefs that he treats others with the same respect they show him. Sound familiar? And that I was nothing but kind and courteous. I dressed the way I wanted, had an honest conversation, and left him with a healthier understanding of Satanism. Not bad for a Sunday morning. Hail Satan, Reverend Gregory. Well, thank you for sending that, Reverend, and likewise I have to say as a Satanist, I don't really care if somebody is Catholic. Christians make up about a quarter to two-thirds of the world's population, I think, and the majority of those are of the Catholic denomination. So the way I see it, invariably, you're going to have to work with a Christian on something or another, whether that's an accountant or a worker at the post office, a Christian neighbor, a Christian coworker, or whatever. And I'm not going to try to convert such a person to Satanism, since that would make absolutely no sense within the context of Satanism. First of all, that's not how people become Satanists, and second of all, I would have nothing to gain from a conversion like that. Now, if they're the type of obnoxious Christian who shows up when I'm minding my own business and wants to proselytize or harass me, well, that's another story. Obviously, I do have a problem with that. I will stand my ground, and depending on what kind of mood I'm in that day, I may give them a merciless response that leaves them intellectually terrorized and looking for a therapist the next day. But, some guy like this accountant, who just happens to be some mild-mannered Catholic, if I'm there for accounting and he's a good accountant, then I don't really care whether he worships Jesus or the Michelin Man, for all I care. He has his reasons for his religion. I have my reasons for mine. Now, can you file this tax form or not? Maybe my accountant is Catholic. I don't know. I don't care. I've never asked her. Hasn't come up. Maybe she's a Satanist, for all I know. Again, don't know. But notice how Reverend Grigori didn't try to play the angle of, well, as a Satanist, I spit on your Catholicism and I am taking my business elsewhere. No, he didn't give him a hard time or try to play up the satanic angle to harass him. He didn't go to the other extreme either and pathetically try to claim that Satanists are really good altruistic people and that Satanism is about philanthropy. That's simply bullshit. The only people who would claim that are passive-aggressive trolls. No, he just played the confident devil. Smiled, polite but firm, gave him the elevator pitch, and that's that. As he said, dressed the way he wanted, had an honest conversation, and left him with a healthier understanding of Satanism. All right, let's move on to the next email. This next listener has wished to remain anonymous, so let's just call him Arnold. Arnold, not his real name, of course, says, quote, I read the Satanic Bible when I was much younger, and as I look back on my life, I see that I've been living like a Satanist pretty much all my life. In the past year, I've read the other 8 total books written by founder Magus Dr. LeVay and current Magus Maestro Gilmore, Magister Templi Rex Barton, and Magister Johnson, cover to cover. Oddly enough, that is 9 books in total, 9 also being the devil's number. I listened to all of the Satansplain podcasts also, and I sent in my membership registration form to the Church of Satan last week. Your knowledge of Satanism and how you explain it is amazing. We also see eye to eye on many other things. I had 2 questions. Do the membership cards get shipped to the shipping address of people's PayPal accounts or the home address on the copy of the ID sent in with the form? I was also wondering if there are any plans you know of for a Church of Satan celebration this 6660 Anno Satanis, Age of Fire. So I wrote back to Arnold and said I was glad to hear about this decision of his to join the Church of Satan. Also happy to hear that Satansplain has been a help with that decision. As for mailing the membership card and all that stuff, I think the central office uses whatever address you gave them in the letter or in the return address of the physical envelope. Of course, maybe the address on the ID would be used over the PayPal address. Regardless, if you think there might be some confusion, you can always contact the COS directly. You can do that through churchofsatan.com, explain the full situation. Say, hi, I'm so-and-so. I sent in a registration. Please use this address that you can see in my PayPal account instead of the address on the ID I sent, which is this, or whatever it is. Of course, you should specify one or the other so that Central knows it's really you and not some random person pretending to be you and, have us send your stuff elsewhere, because we're not going to fall for that. As for the questions of events for June 6, 2060, well, that's quite a few years away. I mean, I'll be in my 80s, assuming I'm still alive. So what Church of Satan members will decide to do then, I have no idea. I am glad to say I was around on June 6, 2006, and attended the 6606 High Mass. If something goes on for the year 2060, well, I imagine it would be the same sort of thing. Some Church of Satan members say, hey, here's a cool thing we'd like to do. This is a good date. It's a good excuse to, do this thing. So who's in? Let's plan this thing. Let's do it. Now, Arnold also adds, I also have a Satanecdote for you. Well, we did already do the Satanecdote with the theme song and all that in this episode, but let's just read another quick one here. Arnold says, people that know me well know I read a lot of history, philosophy, and biographies. They usually ask me my thoughts on how to live life. Most people I know and my own parents are very Christian or Catholic. They all agree with my thoughts on how to live life without knowing it's all satanic philosophy. I laugh inside, especially when it's at the table during holidays like Easter that just passed. So this brings up a good point. There are some people who think that to be a Satanist, they have to shout out their identity from the rooftops and be as out of the closet and explicit as possible. I think that's something, to be fair, almost all people go through when they find something that's really new to them and thrilling and life-changing. It doesn't have to necessarily be Satanism. It could be something else. But in those cases, there's this urge to shout it out to the world. But remember that Satanism views survival as most important and views counterproductive pride as a sin. So there's no shame in keeping your satanic identity hidden, or at least not telling each and every person you meet that you're a Satanist. Plus, I would argue there is some satanic satisfaction in what Arnold describes here, this sort of being hidden right in the open and thinking sinisterly to yourself, if they only knew. You know, I talked about some of this myself in the interview I gave a little while back on the Neutral Wisdom podcast, which you can look up. And one more email I would like to read here. Jordan writes, Hi, Bill. I hope you're doing well. This year in February, I read the Satanic Bible for the first time and found myself on every page and in every word. I read it with a mischievous, almost childish grin, as if LaVey had given me the keys to the candy store, with the store being my autonomy of thought. On top of this, listening to many episodes of Satansplain has been an amazing tool of explaining my religion and introducing the world of Satanism, as it were. That said, I'm more than aware of how spoiled I am in regards to readily available resources of information on Satanism. Even ignoring the widespread availability of LaVey's work, the Church of Satan website is an absolute goldmine that I frankly spend way too much time on. Such is the reason for this email. In your experience being a member of the Church of Satan for so long, how has the user experience of obtaining material on and about the Church of Satan changed over the years? I'm aware the internet has simplified and, in its own way, complicated matters of getting reliable information on the topic. Yet, I've always been curious and attracted to the simpler time before the internet was the status quo and an unfortunate Christ on its own. I remember hearing that one could send the church a small fee and get rituals on paper. Does the church still have print and materials inaccessible on the site? The second question is more of a personal ramble. Yesterday, I received my glorious Sigil of Baphomet medallion and already adore wearing it. I'm curious where this tradition started and when you yourself got your first medallion and started wearing it. And of course, I'm sure you've said it before, but when was the first time you read the Satanic Bible, and do you have a favorite line from the Infernal Diatribe? I look forward to further episodes of Satansplain and the Devil's Mischief. Until then, have a great day, and of course, hail Satan. I wrote back to Jordan and said I'm glad the show has been an inspiration. As for the changes in the ease of obtaining satanic literature, I'd say it's overall a positive, but certainly has had some negatives. Earlier in the show, I talked about making music and how the technological improvements have made it easier for musicians to record and distribute their music without having to go to a recording studio or get with a record label and so on. But I also added that this has also led to a lot of crappy music, recorded from people's bedrooms and put on YouTube, for example, mistakes and all. In my opinion, the earlier barricades you had to go through to get a demo recording also filtered out a lot of people who weren't really taking the craft seriously. So what I mean is, for example, back in the day, to actually get a band demo or a decent recording you could sell at shows, you had to, You had to make the effort. You had to make the effort to actually get the money for time in a recording studio, or money to rent or buy a multi-track machine to make one on your own. If you were working with a band, that usually meant everybody having to cough up their share of the money for it. Not to mention, buy the physical media and the costs and time to reproduce it. And I think because of all that, the musicians who were maybe not passionate enough to put in the time or money didn't do it. So in this day and age where every musician has a smartphone in his pocket and can record themselves in a bedroom and put it on YouTube, I do have to wonder how many of them would still make the effort to get a good recording of themselves if it meant having to make the effort to get up off the couch and leave the house, go to a music store, buy a 4-track recorder, or find a recording studio and pay them money and so on. There are a lot of musicians who would still do that for sure. But I imagine there would be a lot who wouldn't. So likewise, it is certainly great that we live in a day and age where you can go to a place like satanme.com or amazon.com and order the Satanic Bible in paperback, go to churchofsatan.com and read essays. If you order that Satanic Bible, have it shipped to your house in a couple of days. But think of how back in the day, if you wanted the Satanic Bible, you had to make the effort to leave the house. Then you had to have the balls to go to a bookstore in person, get a physical copy of the Satanic Bible from the shelf, and face a real-life cashier to ring it up, whom you'd give money out of your own pocket. I think most Satanists would still do the same if that was their only choice. But again, I do have to wonder how many people these days who claim to be Satanists or are just interested in Satanism would frankly be too afraid, too cheap, or too lazy to go into a store and buy a paperback book. I suspect there are people like that, in which case it's hard for me to take their professed commitment to Satanism seriously. I talk a little bit more about this in one of my essays titled Why a Free Satanic Bible Isn't Satanic, which you can read on churchofsatan.com. The essay itself is free for the reading, go figure. And I suspect there are other groups who have this problem, not just Satanists, where technology has perhaps made too many people expect things to be easy. I had a friend, for example, who was not a Satanist, but had a professional career doing witchcraft, tarot readings, seances, and that sort of stuff. And he was a friend of mine. He asked me to be the admin, or one of the admins, for a witchcraft discussion group he was running on Facebook. So yeah, I said sure. And when I was doing that, I noticed there would be posts on occasion of people asking things like, hey, can anybody show me where to get some free spells? Or sometimes it wouldn't even be a complete sentence. There'd be a post in all lowercase, free spells, please. Not even spelling please, PLS. Or even without the please. Free spells, ? And I would tell these people, look, if you can't even find a way to save up some money to buy a paperback witchcraft book, and for that matter, you don't even have the know-how or patience to use a search engine like Google to look for examples of witchcraft spells that are out there, if that's the case, then what is it that you hope that a witchcraft spell will give you? I mean, aside from the debate of whether this Wicca spell stuff works or some chaos magic spell works, and what any of that means, I have to wonder, if you don't have the discipline or dedication to invest in a paperback book, then what makes you think you'll have the discipline or dedication to carry out a witchcraft spell? To gather the ingredients it asks for and find a place to perform it and all that. So getting back to the topic of Satanism, Jordan had also asked in his email if he could still write to the Church of Satan, send them a few dollars, and get some rituals back. The answer is no, because there's no need to do that these days. It certainly made sense back in the day, back in the 1960s, before the Satanic Bible was even published. But now in the year 2025, all of our literature is in print. They've been in print for a long time, and you can order the physical books from anywhere in the world, really. The Church of Satan is not a secret society. It's not like when I became a Magister, I got access to some rituals that other Satanists don't get access to. It's like, no, it's all available. Satanic Bible, Satanic rituals, Satanic scriptures, and so on. So you don't need to write to the Church of Satan to obtain Satanic rituals. You can just buy a book like the ones I listed. I will say one more thing about Satanic ritual, tying it back to what I said earlier about the sort of witch or warlock wannabe who expects strangers on the internet to pass some free spells their way. When it comes to Satanism, there are, again, the people who will try to argue that Satanic ritual can be anything you want it to be. And there are some people who try to argue that you don't need all those tools listed in the Satanic Bible to perform a Satanic ritual, because a Satanic ritual can be something as simple as a meditation that can take place in your mind, because it's all about you. You are the real power, and it's not a gong or a candle that makes the magic, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I get that. I sincerely believe, however, that there is something magical about the props themselves. When I say that there's something magical, I don't mean supernaturally, as I do not believe in the supernatural. I do not believe a candle has a special supernatural power. But no, when I say something magical about the props, I mean in line with the actual definition of magic in the Satanic Bible, which does not depend on any belief in the supernatural. You should reread that paragraph from time to time. It's at the start of page 110 in the Satanic Bible, the definition of magic as used in the book. Now, I truly believe that the act of getting together the altar and the props for a ritual and following a few specific guidelines and directions does something transformative, something self-transformative, something psychological. I think there is something disciplinary about it, and something that inherently focuses your will, which is part of what magic is. Because to use an example I gave in a previous episode, imagine a Satanist, for example, saying, "Oh, I have this enemy, and I just want to have him destroyed. He is the most vile of all human beings. I hate him with every fiber of my being. I feel it down to my gut as a primal being. I hate this motherfucker, and it's just tearing me up. I want to see him eliminated. I want to do whatever it takes. I need a black candle? Well, I don't have one of those. I'd have to go find some store that sells those, which sounds like that could take a while. And I need a bell? Well, I don't know if I could get one of those. I don't have one of those. I don't know where to buy those. And I have to find a place where I can do this ritual for half an hour, like without interruptions. Oh, gee, I don't know about that. I'm a pretty busy guy. This all sounds like a lot of work. I think I'll just play this video game I have or watch some porn or something. My point here is that as a Satanist, you really fancy yourself as your own god, in control of your own life, and you want to see your will manifested in the real world. And if as a Satanist you have these tools available to focus and direct that will, utilizing the psychodrama of ritual to harness those deepest primal emotions of yours. If that's the case, and yet you can't follow through because you can't be bothered to buy a couple of candles and read some lines from the Satanic Bible, then I'd say you may want to re-examine these desires of yours. Now, just to get to the other questions Jordan asked. When did I get my first sigil medallion? I think I got mine sometime in the 1990s from an occult store. The one I currently wear, I got from the Church of Satan Emporium, which has since reopened as satanme.com. But I've had some others before and after. As for the tradition of wearing a sigil and where this comes from, well, I guess it's like all other religious traditions where you wear your religion's symbol. It's a pretty ubiquitous thing. We see Christians wearing crosses, Jews wearing a Star of David, Hindus wearing an Om sign, not to mention occultists wearing whatever medallions. So I don't see why Satanists would be different in that regard. Obviously, not all Satanists opt to wear a sigil, but I personally do. I think there's something to be said ritualistically about consciously wearing the symbol of Satanism, even if it's under the shirt. And this is just a general human thing. We know as Satanists that Humans are very ritual-oriented creatures, and, humans wear symbols of their convictions. As for when was the first time I read the Satanic Bible, well, I first read it as a wild teenager in the 1980s, but I didn't really approach it maturely, I must confess. So my mind wasn't ready for it. I was just wanting to get in on the pure rebellion part and skimmed through most of it. I ended up going through a mix of different religions over the 10 years that followed that, and it wasn't until I was in my early 20s that I stumbled across the Satanic Bible again and read it as an adult with a better mindset. And quite simply, the truth hit me like a ton of bricks, especially the chapter, The God You Save May Be Yourself, because that did quite describe what I had been doing, bouncing from different religions in a spiritual game of self-deceit, as the chapter describes. And finally, Jordan asked for a favorite line from the Book of Satan, which is the first of the 4 parts of the Satanic Bible, the Infernal Diatribe. If I had to pick one, I would say probably the following one. There is no heaven of glory bright, and no hell where sinners roast. Here and now is our day of torment. Here and now is our day of joy. Here and now is our opportunity. Choose ye this day, this hour, for no Redeemer liveth. Say unto thine own heart, I am mine own Redeemer. And I think that's a good line to leave things on. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time on Satansplain. Hail Satan.
You have been listening to Satansplain. For more information about the show, visit the official website at Satansplain.com. And for more information about Satanism itself, visit churchofsatan.com. This episode, copyright 2025, Magister Bill M.